Rick Lagina has finally located the $650 million treasure beneath Oak Island, with a major discovery identifying an underground area that could finally give the team its clearest target yet in the centuries-old search. This isn't simply another theory built around a promising signal, an unexplained anomaly, or a fragment recovered from a drill hole. This time, the investigation has produced physical evidence that could narrow the search to a specific underground location and connect several of Oak Island's most important clues in a way the team has never been able to demonstrate before. This is the Curse of Oak Island Season 13, and the finale is where the significance of this discovery finally comes into focus. What exactly did Rick Lagina locate? What evidence points toward a $650 million hidden treasure? And could this finally be the location where the island's greatest secret was deliberately concealed? That is what this story is about. To understand how Rick reached this extraordinary discovery, we have to go back to the evidence that first began narrowing the search toward the island's deepest secrets. The most important part of this discovery is not the $650 million figure. It is the location. Because, after years of searching beneath Oak Island, one of the biggest challenges has never simply been proving that something unusual might exist underground. The real challenge has been determining where the most important evidence is concentrated. A promising anomaly is not enough. A metal reading is not enough. A piece of old timber is not enough. Even an intriguing artifact is not enough. The team needs those clues to converge. They need a location where multiple lines of evidence can be examined together. And that is what makes Rick Lagina's discovery potentially so important. Oak Island has produced an extraordinary number of clues. Old timber, metal fragments, coins, possible tunnels, underground voids, unusual structures, and laboratory results that have raised questions about precious metals. But individual discoveries rarely provide a complete answer. A piece of timber can demonstrate human activity, but it cannot automatically reveal who placed it there. A coin can provide a historical date, but it cannot explain why it was buried. A metal reading can identify an area worth investigating, but it cannot prove that treasure is present. And an underground void can sometimes have a natural explanation. The real breakthrough comes when several independent clues begin pointing toward the same place. When unusual materials are recovered from deep underground, when those materials are associated with deliberate construction, when laboratory testing produces significant results, and when historical artifacts provide a possible timeline, that is when the investigation becomes much more focused. The $650 million valuation should be understood as a hypothetical figure associated with the legendary Oak Island treasure. Not as a confirmed amount already recovered. There is no independently verified evidence establishing that $650 million worth of treasure has physically been removed from Oak Island. The significance of the claim is the possibility that the team has identified a specific underground location where a concealed deposit could potentially be found and scientifically investigated. And that brings us back to the money pit. The money pit has remained at the center of Oak Island's mystery since the earliest treasure hunters began excavating the island. Early searchers reportedly encountered timber underground. They continued digging, then water flooded their workings. That flooding became one of the defining features of the mystery, but it also created one of the most important questions. Was the flooding natural, or was it engineered? If underground channels were deliberately constructed to redirect seawater into the excavation, then the money pit may have been part of a sophisticated defense system. And if someone built a defense system, something may have been valuable enough to protect. Perhaps gold, perhaps silver, perhaps coins, perhaps historical documents, or perhaps something whose value had nothing to do with money. That possibility changes how the entire underground environment has to be interpreted. The money pit may not have been the final destination. It could have been an entrance. A shaft could lead toward a tunnel. A tunnel could connect to another structure. A drainage system could protect the route. and a concealed chamber could contain whatever the original builders intended to hide. That is the kind of underground network the modern team has been trying to reconstruct. During Season 13, one of the major operations involved MP1 in the Money Pit area. The large caisson was used to investigate the underground environment around the suspected solution channel. The excavation eventually reached bedrock at approximately 210 feet, but the operation also produced material that could be scientifically examined. Wood samples were recovered from deep underground. Those samples were sent for laboratory testing. During the finale, 15 wood samples were tested. One sample from Shaft 2A produced the highest silver reading and the third highest gold reading among the samples tested. That result is intriguing, but it does not prove that $650 million worth of treasure is buried at that exact location. It does not prove that the sample came from a treasure chamber, and it does not establish the value of any possible deposit. What it does is raise another question. Why are precious metal signatures appearing in deep underground material? Are those results isolated, or are they part of a broader pattern? If similar results appear in nearby samples, the evidence becomes more interesting. If those samples are connected to man-made structures, the significance increases. And if the same area contains artifacts or construction evidence consistent with deliberate concealment, the clues begin to converge. That convergence is what the investigation needs. Because Oak Island cannot be solved by one spectacular clue, the answer has to survive multiple lines of evidence. One of the discoveries that helped expand the underground picture came from Lot 8. The team encountered a massive boulder estimated to weigh approximately 40,000 pounds. The boulder was enormous, but the more important question was what could be beneath it. The team eventually moved the massive boulder. Once it was removed, evidence of a man-made feature appeared below. That discovery mattered because it suggested that deliberate underground construction may extend beyond the traditional money pit area. And if engineered structures exist across different parts of Oak Island, the possibility of a larger underground network becomes increasingly important. The money pit could be one section. The tunnels could form another. The flooding system could serve as a defense, and somewhere within that network could be the actual location of the concealed treasure. This could also explain why earlier searchers repeatedly failed. They may have been close to the correct area without understanding the underground architecture. They may have encountered water defenses. They may have disturbed important structures. Or they may simply have been searching vertically when the real target was located horizontally. That is where locating the treasure becomes so important. The team does not necessarily need to excavate the entire island. If the evidence can identify the right underground zone, the search becomes much more manageable. Modern technology allows them to approach the problem differently. They can map underground anomalies. They can drill targeted locations. They can recover samples from precise depths. They can test those materials in laboratories. And they can compare discoveries from different parts of the island. That makes it possible to narrow the search. And narrowing the search is what Rick Lagina's discovery represents. The investigation may finally have a target, but locating a target is not the same thing as recovering a treasure. That distinction is critical. A location can contain evidence without containing the treasure itself. The treasure could have been moved, the chamber could be empty, the deposit could have been disturbed, or the suspected location could simply represent one part of a larger system. That is why the next phase of the investigation matters so much. The team has to test the location. They have to determine what is actually there, and they have to establish whether the evidence belongs to the original construction or to later activity. This is where the historical evidence becomes important. During Season 13, the team investigated a Portuguese coin dated to approximately 1369 to 1371. The coin immediately raised questions about early transatlantic activity. But an old Portuguese coin does not automatically prove that Portuguese explorers buried treasure on Oak Island. Coins travel, they can remain in circulation for generations, they can cross oceans, they can be lost, and they can be deposited long after their original date. That is why context matters. Where was the coin found? How deep was it? What material surrounded it? Was the area disturbed? Were other artifacts nearby? Was there evidence of deliberate construction? If the coin is connected to an intact underground structure, its significance becomes greater. If additional artifacts support the same interpretation, the evidence becomes stronger. And if material from the same historical period appears near the newly identified treasure location, the investigation gains another important connection. This is also where theories involving Portuguese explorers and the Knights Templar become relevant. But these remain theories. A genuine historical connection requires physical evidence. The dates must align. The construction must be compatible. The artifacts must support the interpretation, and the underground system must make sense within the proposed historical timeline. If those elements converge, the theory becomes stronger. If they do not, it must be reconsidered. That is why the location itself may ultimately be more important than the $650 million valuation. If the team has identified a specific underground area where multiple clues converge, they have something that can be tested. Imagine that the drilling data points toward a concealed structure. The team investigates the area. The excavation reveals deliberately placed timber. Below it, another structure appears. The surrounding material produces unusual laboratory results. Then an artifact is recovered. The experts examine it. Its date fits. Suddenly, several independent clues begin pointing toward the same conclusion. That would be the kind of evidence capable of changing the investigation. The team would no longer be asking where the treasure might be. They would be asking whether the treasure is actually inside the structure they have located. That is a much more precise question. And precise questions can be answered. The $650 million figure, however, remains hypothetical. The actual value of any recovered material would need to be independently established. Experts would need to authenticate the objects. Their age would need to be determined. Their origin would need to be investigated, and their financial or historical value would need to be assessed. The number itself is not proof. The evidence is. And the strongest evidence would come from a preserved underground context. That is why locating a specific underground target could represent such a major step forward. The team can document it, measure it, test it, excavate it carefully, and determine what it contains. This is very different from the treasure hunts of the past. Earlier searchers had reports, legends, maps, and theories. The modern team has drilling technology, underground mapping, laboratory testing, and the ability to compare discoveries from multiple locations. They can test evidence instead of relying entirely on interpretation. That does not guarantee a treasure recovery, but it provides a stronger path toward determining what is actually beneath Oak Island. And that path leads directly into the underground architecture. The money pit provides the mystery. The tunnels provide the possible route. The flood system may provide the protection, and the newly identified location could provide the destination. If those elements are connected, Oak Island may have been deliberately engineered to conceal something. The builders may not have simply buried an object. They may have constructed a system designed to make the deposit extremely difficult to reach. Water, timber, stone, depth, concealed passages. That would explain why generations of searchers could dig beneath the island without reaching the original target. But there is another possibility. The location could contain an important structure without containing a fortune. Perhaps the treasure was removed centuries ago. Perhaps earlier searchers reached it without understanding what they had found. Perhaps the deposit was moved, or perhaps the structure served another purpose. That possibility has to remain open. A promising location is evidence. It is not automatically proof of treasure. That is why what the team recovers from the location matters so much. If nothing significant is found, the theory weakens. If historical artifacts are found, the investigation advances. If precious metals are found, the treasure possibility becomes stronger. And if a substantial intact deposit is recovered together with identifying historical evidence, the implications could be enormous. That is the kind of discovery that could finally transform the Oak Island investigation. But even an empty chamber could be valuable. It could reveal construction techniques. It could show where a tunnel led. It could explain the flooding system. And it could identify another location that deserves attention. This is why the search cannot be reduced to one number. The $650 million estimate is only a headline. The real objective is to reconstruct the history of the underground system. Who built it? When? Why? And what did they place inside? Those are the questions the evidence has to answer. The more accurately the team can reconstruct the underground network, the more precisely they can determine where a concealed deposit could have existed. A tunnel's direction can eliminate large areas. A chamber's location can narrow the search. A concentration of metal readings can narrow it further. And a collection of historical artifacts can provide context. Eventually, the search could reach a point where only a few locations remain plausible. That is the moment treasure hunters have always wanted. Not another theory, not another anomaly. A target, a structure, a location, and evidence that can be tested. This is why Lagina's discovery could represent such a major step forward. It transforms a broad island-wide mystery into a focused underground investigation. But the evidence still has to be interpreted carefully. Oak Island has been disturbed repeatedly. People have lived there, worked there, built there, excavated there, and searched for treasure there. Not every object beneath the island belongs to the original mystery. Some could be much more recent. That is why precise dating and archaeological context remain essential. The strongest possible discovery would be an intact underground structure containing multiple objects that all fit the same historical period. That would create a chain of evidence. A location, a structure, a date, an artifact, a purpose, and potentially a treasure. If those elements align, the hidden fortune becomes far more than a legend. It becomes a historical hypothesis supported by physical evidence. But even then, the $650 million valuation would have to be independently established. The actual value could be lower. It could be higher. Or the historical importance could make a conventional financial valuation almost meaningless. A collection of rare artifacts may be priceless to historians without having a simple market value. That is why the number is ultimately secondary. The real question is what Lagina has located. And if the evidence points toward a deliberately concealed deposit, the implications could extend far beyond Oak Island. It could change our understanding of early exploration. It could reveal previously unknown movements of wealth. It could provide evidence of contact between distant regions. Or it could finally explain why generations of treasure hunters believed Oak Island was hiding something extraordinary. That is the opportunity now facing the team. A specific underground location, a possible hidden structure, and a collection of clues that may finally be converging. But the investigation still needs proof. That proof must come from physical evidence. The location has to be documented. The structure has to be dated. The material has to be tested. The artifacts have to be authenticated. And the historical interpretation has to survive scrutiny. Only then can the mystery move from possibility toward a defensible conclusion. That is why the Season 13 finale matters. The investigation has moved closer to a specific underground target. The clues are becoming more concentrated, and the evidence is increasingly being tested rather than simply interpreted. Imagine the moment when the team finally reaches the precise location. The excavation moves downward. The surrounding material changes. A structure appears. The team begins carefully exposing it. Then the first unmistakable artifact emerges. Experts examine it. The date fits. Then another object is recovered. And another. Finally, the evidence suggests that the team has reached the place where something was deliberately concealed. At that moment, the entire investigation changes. The question is no longer whether Oak Island contains a hidden fortune. The question becomes who put it there. That could be the most important discovery of all. Because every treasure has a history. Someone owned it. Someone transported it. Someone concealed it. and someone built the structure that protected it. If the team can identify those people, the mystery could finally be solved. That is why the $650 million figure is only part of the story. The real value lies in the explanation. The explanation for the money pit, the explanation for the tunnels, the explanation for the flooding, the explanation for the underground structure, and the explanation for why Oak Island was chosen. If the newly located evidence can answer those questions, the island may finally surrender its most important secret. But until that evidence is independently verified, the $650 million figure remains hypothetical. What is real is the investigation, the physical discoveries, the underground structures, the laboratory results, and the effort to connect them. That is what makes Rick Lagina's latest discovery so compelling. The search may finally have moved from asking where something could be to determining where the evidence actually leads. And if that location contains an intact deposit, the next objects recovered from beneath Oak Island could reveal not only the value of what was hidden, but who concealed it when they did it, and why they went to such extraordinary lengths to keep it secret. The $650 million treasure may be the headline, but locating the right place could finally reveal the truth about what has been hidden beneath Oak Island.